once again. This is Nuance. I'm Mike Scala. We'll be taking a look at the ballot measures that you'll be voting on in New York. Of course, I'm joined, as always, by Jay Carter, also known as Timid, the hip hop artist in the chair of BLM Tokyo. What's going on, Jay?
Oh, in that middle of confusion of the seasons. Like right now I'm feeling like I need a little bit of air condition, but yesterday like I needed a little bit of heat. It's like right in that
We just,
cusp,
yeah, we just had that in New York where it was chilly for a bit, and then all of a sudden it got warm again. I actually put the AC on a bit yesterday.
right?
It was 77 degrees in the house.
Yeah, I'm with it. Let's just keep it up though, you know.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. I could do without the cold weather altogether.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I hear people like, "Oh yeah, this is great weather." Like, just shut up. Like, there's something wrong with you. This is not good weather.
Well, if it stays like this, you know, we shouldn't complain, right? If it gets cold, then we have problems.
Yeah. Yeah, but we know it is. It's only going to get colder from here.
Right, right. It's
So
inevitable.
it's actually there's been some good days, but last year it took a lot longer to start getting cold. This year it seems to be kind of back on track, but then a couple of days back on track. But I don't know. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
I'm not up for it.
Remember when everyone was talking about global warming
Right.
back, and then that changed to climate change, right? Because
Right.
I guess
Because it
people
was
on the
confusing people.
yeah, it was confusing people, and the people on the right would be like, "Oh, it's snowing. What happened to your global warming?" And
Right.
actually, it was indicative of climate change, but it wasn't always in the one direction, right? Sometimes it just makes more extreme weather on both sides.
Right. And that we are definitely seeing that. I mean, Florida has been getting it with the hurricanes.
Yeah, I know. Crazy,
I
crazy.
mean, record-breaking ones. And it seems like every year for like the past, I don't know, several years, it's always record-breaking weather. Like whether it's, hurricanes or temperatures or whatnot, like it's crazy.
So, speaking of the fall, I just received an email from our friend Khalil Anderson, New York
What
State
up?
Assembly member, and he is doing a fall celebration on Wednesday, October 30th at TJ Burns Restaurant. We have an address for that. It's in New York for those not local.
Hmm.
Uh, it's 77 Fulton Street, New York, New York. So it's a fall celebration and his fourth anniversary in office. For those who don't know, Khalil is the youngest Black elected official in New York State history. And so
Mm.
it is something to celebrate. And he's announcing special guests: Attorney General Letitia James, Public Advocate Jumaane Williams, Manhattan Borough President Mark Lamine, Senator James Sanders, Assemblyman Alex Bors, Assemblyman Harvey Epstein. So
Mm.
if you have any questions, any further information, it says feel free to contact the team at information at khalilforthepeople.com. That's the number four, information at khalilforthepeople.com. And wish you well with the event.
Yeah.
So
Khalil's definitely one you just knew that he was going to be in office someday, in some kind of
we met
capacity.
him when he was really young, right? You were there.
Yeah, yeah, he
Might
wasn't
have been there
even
the day that I met him as well at the Knights of Columbus in
right.
Rockaway. And he was a teenager, right? Very young kid.
Yeah.
Um, Approached me out the blue, right? I was just standing there. He said, excuse me, very, very soft spoken, always been very soft spoken, right? Comes up very polite, very soft spoken, says, excuse me, are you running for office? Oh, I want to help you. And that was it.
Yep.
I didn't even know why he wanted to help, what his deal was, where he came from. It turns out that his mom was active in politics in the community. So I'm sure that's how he got involved in it himself. But handed out flyers for us on Mott Avenue and I think Central Avenue in Rockaway. I mean, he was down with us from day one. In 2017, he was the field director slash volunteer coordinator on the campaign and was probably the best campaign worker I ever had. I mean, he really went after it. One time, he convinced someone who was going to vote for one of the other candidates to vote for me. And I think it was actually a friend of theirs, too. It was really wild the way he did it. It was like some Jedi mind trick he was playing. I was like, wow, how do you convince someone who doesn't know me but knows them to vote for me? And it was just, he was very persuasive, very polite as well. But it was that combination of the persistence, the good arguments that he was making, right? The persuasiveness, and him being not aggressive, not in your face, not he's not doing it in a way that's going to turn you off or make you resist,
Right.
but it kind of draws you in, right? So I was actually on the phone with him once who was at someone's door, and I remember them saying that they knew this other guy, they were going to vote for this other guy. He was like, nothing against him, nothing against him. We like him too. But you got to vote for Mike because Mike has more experience. Mike has been in this. Mike knows what he's doing when it comes to this. Mike has done this, and he's like, he's just the guy that we need right now for these reasons. And,
Mm.
and after the conversation, the guy was like, you know what? You're right. You convinced me. You're right. I'm going with Mike. And I was like, wow, that's crazy. It's like he actually turned one of their friends like to our side. Another time, not to be on this for too long, but another time it just came to me. I was at the campaign headquarters and he was making phone calls, right? This woman who was a registered Democrat said that she was thinking of voting Republican this time because she was fed up with everything that was going on in the city and what have you. And
Right.
he, again, very politely, very coolly listed all of the reasons why you couldn't vote for that candidate. And he apparently convinced her because there was a pause. And then he said, wait a minute, you're not voting at all now? And and then he was like, wait, can we talk about this? And I think at one point she even hung up with him and he called her right back and said, I think we got disconnected. He went right back into it. And that's just how he was. He was so assertive, but not aggressive, right? That's the distinction. He was not aggressive because you can easily turn people off if you get all up in their face and you're, kind of hostile. It feels hostile, right? If you're really aggressive with them. But he was not that. He was always very, very down to earth, cool, humble, right? His approach was humble, but persuasive at the same time. And he just never gave up. He really cared about getting those votes, getting the message of the campaign out. It really meant something to him personally. I love when you have people like that on your side. Those are the best people to have on your side. I got another guy like that now, Joe. Shout out to Joe. He comes in, he was living in Chicago, but he would come in and stay in New York for a few months at a time to help with the campaign. And he loved it. He would send him out to Howard Beach. He would knock on doors, and you could tell he had a passion for it because at the end of the night, he would come back and he was so excited to tell you the stories of the people he met. Like, oh, I was on this street and I met this woman. She says she knows you. I was like, yeah. And I was like, I'm like, yeah, I know her. You know what I mean? And like he would recount all the stories of the people he met on the trail. And he had such a passion for it. It felt so good when he was able to reach people and convince them why we were the campaign to support. You know what I mean? And some people you hire on a campaign, they just they're there for a paycheck. They're there for a job for them. They don't really care about it. But when you find these passionate people who really believe in the work that you're trying to do and what you're trying to achieve, I mean, nothing beats that. You know what I mean? That's awesome. And then I start thinking, I remember I would start to think, man, I got to win this campaign for Khalil and for guys like Joe. It wasn't even about me or, what I mean? Like it was for them because they believe in it so much. And it's like, I didn't want to let them down. It's like we lost Jay. Oh, you're on mute, Jay.
Hello.
Yeah.
There we go.
I
Hello. I
was
said,
like,
well,
froze for a second.
shout out
Yeah.
to Khalil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Shout out to Khalil. Shout out to everyone doing good work out there. Listen, this is campaign season right now as we speak. We're in the last
Right.
stretch before election day. I guess you don't have to deal with this now. Maybe you see it online, Jay, but we're inundated here with campaign ads everywhere. Turn on TV, YouTube as well, right? But anywhere you look, you see a campaign ad. And me being someone who works in politics, I never was the type to say, I'm sick of it. I'm tired of it. Can't wait for it to be over. I'm kind of feeling that way this year. This year, I'm kind of feeling like these ads, they're just really
Too
stressing
much.
me.
Huh?
Yeah, I'm just tired of them. I'm tired of them. Maybe they seem more disingenuous now than ever before. Um, Especially if you look at the ads for federal office, for Congress, let's say, or for the president or whatever, they're focused on like three issues only, right? I would say both the Democrats and the Republicans are talking about the border now, and they're both on the same side. They both basically sound like Republicans usually sound when it comes to the border, right?
We've got to protect the border.
Yeah, we got to strengthen our border and all that kind of stuff. Okay, which not saying that's a bad thing, but it's just funny that both sides are using that talking point now. And then
Right.
the Democrats are also pushing heavy on the abortion issue, right? and the Republicans are pushing on the trans stuff, and they're saying that they're basically trying to scare people into saying that, well, if you vote for the Democrat, girls are going to play boy sports and vice versa. That's like their whole thing, and so they're just hammering these same messages over and over and over again. I don't even see any talk of the economy. You know what I mean? I don't see any of these other issues. It's just a constant barrage of the border, abortion, and locker rooms. Like that's all you see constantly all day long.
Mm. Yeah, I don't see those ads because like they would be geographically targeted, you know what I
All
mean?
right. And
So
that's
I
tough to
don't
do in New York, by the way, because it's the biggest media market we have in the US here. So if you're running for a local seat, like I think I mentioned this, our local assemblywoman, shout out to Stacey Fenfer-Amato, she has ads on TV now, and I see them when I'm watching cable TV, right? On I think CNN or USA Network and different channels. Those aren't cheap, and you can't as far as I know, you can't hyper target those to a certain district. You have to buy the whole media market, right? Um,
right.
um, Maybe you can do some of that because it is a little odd. I would be curious if you're outside of our district, how far out of our district you would see her ads, right? I don't know. But I'll tell you, I do see, for example, ads of people running for Congress in New Jersey, here in New York. Not our
Right.
district, but it's just that media market that they have to buy. And it's a very expensive one.
Right. Yeah, and it's that's what is one of the advantages or distinguishing markers from digital advertising versus traditional advertising is you can be hyper targeted.
Yeah. I'm curious now, though, now that I think about these assembly ads that I see, how far they reach. Are people in Manhattan getting them? Are people in New Jersey getting them? Right? Because come to think of it, I'm not seeing ads for any other assembly candidate. So I'm wondering if there's some ability to hyper target on CNN and USA and these cable channels now.
Uh, I don't know. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if they've adjusted. And the thing is, it would probably be it wouldn't be it wouldn't be CNN doing the targeting. It would be whatever's carrying CNN.
Right. Right.
Um, and so there might be because from what I understand, the local affiliates or the local stations or whatever that carry these stations, they're the ones that enter their ads. Just
Mm-hmm.
like you're gonna see ads for, the local shops in your area instead of like national things. So
Yeah.
they probably have some measure of ability to do that, but it
Right.
just depends on how wide that area is. You can't get like very granular with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Whereas digital, you could do a lot more.
You're right. There's just so much with the digital that even though it is hyper targeted and there's definitely that advantage, people still think a little bit more authenticity to television ad. Oh, it's on TV.
Yeah. It also depends on the
But
demographic you're trying to reach, I think. Right.
right, yeah,
And maybe this is why commercials on TV tend to slant a little more conservative in their messaging. Maybe they think that these are older voters that are watching
mm,
traditional TV more. I don't know.
right.
But that's one thing that I noticed, which is another reason why I'm kind of over it. Yes, the Democrats do talk about abortion. All right. But aside from that, it seems like both sides at this point are trying to push conservative points. And even like the Democrats that you see, they try to tell you how conservative they are. Basically, why you shouldn't be afraid of them because they're so conservative, which is kind of wild because they never really talk about their democratic values, it seems. But the Republicans also talk about how conservative they are. But I'll admit that sometimes now, even some of the Republicans are doing a little bit of that thing where they don't want to come off as too scary. So they'll say like, I would never vote to ban abortion nationwide. What are you talking about? That kind of stuff. So it seems like I guess to some extent
Lying. They're
both,
lying.
but it seems like to some extent both sides are trying to show that they're not an extremist on their own side.
Right.
But overall, I think the slant of these ads tends to be more conservative than progressive on TV, right? You'll see Democrats talk about how they funded the police and they're tough on crime and they're tough at the border. It's like, all right, that's cool. People want to hear that now, but I also don't hear enough about why are they Democrat then? It's just kind of, what I mean? Like if you're a voter, why would you vote for a Democrat who basically tells you that they're a Republican? Why not just vote Republican at that point? So it's like
Right.
I'd want to hear more from the Democrats about what democratic values they have aside from their conservative credentials.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's I don't know, maybe it's the psychology of the whole thing, the sociology, but like I just watched these and it's grating after a while. You know,
And I think everybody, no matter what
yeah.
side you're on, would probably agree that campaign season is entirely too long. Like,
Well, and you know what's funny? This time, at least on the presidential side, we didn't get the long campaign. At least not
oh,
with
we
Harris,
did. It's
because
just it
she jumped
switched.
into it.
You did, but it was Joe Biden before it was
But
Kamala.
was
So
he?
it's
But was Biden even really doing much when he was campaigning? Though that's the thing. It was more Trump, I guess. But when he first started, he wasn't even really covered that much. It just kind of
right.
happened.
Even Trump, what? Yeah, at the beginning, Trump wasn't doing a lot. It was more the competitors on the Republican side trying to get that
Right.
nomination.
Right. That's true. I remember that. Yeah, the debates, and he wouldn't do the debates and that kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
he didn't even show up, and it's
Yeah.
like people like I got you by the nuts.
But I
So yeah.
remember when he announced for president again, one of the New York papers here, might have been the Daily News, had the headline, Florida man announces presidential run. And they didn't even really give it that much coverage. It was almost like they were like, let's not get sucked into this again until we have to.
Right, right, right. So
So yeah, it'll be interesting. We are almost at that finish line, so I encourage
yeah, we got
you.
about what 2 weeks roughly.
Again, and early voting has begun in some places as well. So
I
I
have
would be
already voted.
okay. There you go. Go out there and vote. I've seen some of my friends as well in some states have done it, so that's a good thing. And if you are passionate, like we talked about, the people we had on our side and continue to have on our side who are passionate for us and our message. If you believe in a campaign, but what someone's trying to do, you believe in the work, then get out there and help them. You know what I mean? Help spread that message. These things cannot be done alone.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what? I should probably check to make sure my stuff got in. Because I sent it off about 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
I can check
Yeah.
online and see.
Well, speaking of checking online, we've been looking at the Rap Attack Lives chart, and it hasn't been updated yet, has it, for today?
It hasn't. It should have been updated like
Last night.
wait, yeah, last night. So maybe it's gonna be, a day late. I don't know.
Maybe dude's on vacation. I don't know. But
Yeah,
yeah, curious to see if we moved up on that chart. Last time we mentioned that we were on the chart, right? We were new entries onto the college rap radio chart. And so we were curious to see
right.
moved up and how far we moved up. Let's see. Nope, still says October 14th. So
Yeah, I
the
checked it
chart
this morning
is not
too.
out. There is another chart that I noticed I got on with Bring Rockets Back, and it's the hyped edit chart. Is that how you say that? Hyped edit? Hyped edit? I don't know.
I don't know.
But they do chart. I didn't even realize. Like, I got an email from them saying you're a chart breaker. Oh yeah. So you go on there. They keep track of these songs in different genres that are hot, and they have Bring Rockets Back on there. It was in the 80s yesterday, and today it shot up to like 41, I think.
Nice.
So one of the hot streaming hip hop songs, according to Hyped Edit. I think they look at SoundCloud and some other metrics and Spotify and stuff like that. So
Nice.
yeah, so definitely happy about that. I did resume the ads on Bring Ruckus Back when we talked about this a while back on here. I think I said that I got the cost per click high. I really meant good, right? So really, if we're being technical, it's I got it low because you don't want to spend, for it to be good, you don't
Less.
want to spend a lot of money per click, obviously. So
Right.
yeah, so when I said high, I really meant low, and I meant it was good. It's actually really optimized now, and I think it's like 20 cents per click or something like that, which is like for every dollar spent, you get 5 people to check it out. So that's pretty nice. Um,
Right.
so yeah, so running that, hoping to trigger some Spotify algorithmic love, right? When you reach a certain threshold on Spotify, you get Discover Weekly and different things like that, where they'll push it out to even more people. And so
Nice.
that's what we're going for with that. And we do have the album dropping on Friday. It feels weird. I've mentioned this before. It feels weird being in this new era of music marketing where you're basically just putting things out and you're doing more of the promotion after they come out, right? I'm used to an era where if you were dropping an album, you would run all throughout the town, all throughout the world, shouting the albums coming, maybe from months in advance. I got an album coming out, the end of October 29th. I got an album coming out. I got an album, whatever it is. Now you see artists drop secret albums, or they call them secret albums, surprise albums, where
Right. A lot of people do that. That
yeah. And I
surprise.
used to I didn't get it. I would see what Beyonce, whoever they would come out with. I was like, all of a sudden, an album was out. They never did any promo on it in advance. It's just the album is out. And my initial thought when I would see that would be, wow, they must have such a huge fan base that they don't even need to hype it in advance. They're just automatically going to get it. And while that's true, I'm seeing there's also another component to it as well, which is now it's really probably more efficient to promote something after it's out. Because if you're, for example, posting TikToks or posting social media clips of a song that's not out, well, if that clip goes viral, they can't listen to the song, right? So if you get a million people looking at the clip and you're like, oh, well, the song is coming out in 2 weeks or the album's going to drop on Friday, whatever it is. Well, by the time that day comes, most of those million people, or however many, moved on to the next thing already. So it's like you're losing the attention that you could have gotten. Whereas if you put out a clip with the stuff already out, then they can go hear it immediately, right? And then you get in that conversion. That's, I think it's maybe just a sign of the times that we're in, where it's almost more efficient to not hype it up. I know artists who are very successful who will tell you that. They say, I never even announce I'm going to drop something. I just drop it, start making content around it, and then people say, oh, that's a nice song. Can I hear it? Yeah, it's out now. So a new world.
Yeah, I mean, there's two ways. You mean you can still do it both. You
Oh,
promote
sure.
leading up to it to build up the excitement so that when it does drop, you can get that initial rush, which
Right.
also the algorithms love. Like if you drop something on Spotify and then a lot of people rush to listen to it that day, then it's gonna be like, oh, okay, this is something big. Let's
Right.
share it out more.
But
So
you could also have content that corresponds with it when you
sure,
drop it, so that when people see the
absolutely,
content, they go
absolutely.
rush to go get it. It's tough. It's I think because of the society that we in, where everything right now is just so it moves so fast, right? The 24-hour news cycle, all that kind of stuff, and it's like the attention span is shorter and shorter.
Yeah,
It's really tough to tell people I got an album coming out in 2 weeks and then have them mark in their calendars and I can't wait for the album to come out. I mean, they're gonna be on to something else by the time it happens. So, like you said, you do both. And one of the things that I did is, push these singles, right? Instead of just dropping the album or just one single, we had 4 singles leading up to the album, and that was building the audience, building the listeners on Spotify, on these platforms. So now when
right.
the album comes out, they're going to see it and they're going to be like, oh, I've been listening to this guy's single. I really like Bring Rockets Back or Handcuffs or Racing Thoughts, whatever. And they're more
Mhm.
likely, hopefully, to check it because they've been playing the singles for the past few months.
Right.
And I'm doing a campaign in Spotify where, if it works correctly, it's supposed to push my album out to the people who are in my audience or who are proxies to it, right? Who listen to people who listen to me or, whatever. So,
Right.
like, I guess they like similar artists or like artists who are on the record or, maybe fans of yours or fans of Cool Giraffes or what have you. So, um,
Absolutely.
I think that's where the buildup comes in, right? You're building your brand all along, but then you continue to push people to it, and probably you spend most of your time promoting the music directly after it's out.
Mm.
Especially now also where these songs can live a lot longer than before. I think we mentioned this once before, where it used to be a song had a very short shelf life. Maybe it's an ironic thing because we talk about the attention spans being shorter now, but there's just so big of a universe out now that if a song comes out or any media comes out, it isn't a matter of it only having 3 months until it's dead. Now there's a whole universe of people out there who are only consuming, very tiny bits of information at a time that haven't gotten to you, haven't seen your stuff yet, haven't heard your stuff yet. And so you can have a song that's been out there for a long time and is new to them. You're pushing it out to an audience that might be receptive to it. It's going to get to people when it gets to them. It might be a year later, but still a brand new song for them. Whereas I think back in the days, it was like, man, the song's on the radio, maybe it's on MTV with the video for a few months, and then it's considered an old song, and you can't really do anything with it anymore.
Yeah, it doesn't I mean I think in some ways there it does last, it can last longer, or at least you can keep pushing it longer because
Yeah,
you can keep creating content around it. You can keep you can run ads over it, that type of stuff. Whereas like you said back in the day, like it hits the charts, it hits MTV or it hits whatever it is, and they're probably not going to start playing it again next year. They may, if it was like, if it struck a big chord or made some kind of a splash, they might throw it in every now and then type of
yeah,
thing.
like Mariah Carey's Christmas album or something like that.
Right,
Yeah,
right. But yeah, after that initial push, that initial phase, you can still, with the new era, at least with social media and stuff, you can keep pushing it in different ways,
Right.
in different forms of content.
Yeah.
Now,
To new people
before,
too. Isn't that wild though? Just thinking about that for a second. Like
but
it used
before
to
people
be
did do it, it was a little different though. Like, for example, Kia's My Neck, My Back,
right,
before it became a hit, she had been pushing that one single for years
right, right,
before it broke through and became this big hit that it was. She'd been like pushing it everywhere manually, and it was, of course, before any of
right.
the digital stuff.
But yeah, and that's the difference though, because once it hits the public consciousness, so to speak, then it
Right.
has a short shelf life, right? It's like, oh, it's almost like not canon until it becomes a hit in that day. Like that song
Right.
basically to the world didn't exist until it became a hit. And then it had whatever it had, a few months or whatever of airplay, right?
Mm.
Whereas now the dynamic is just different. It's not that same kind of world anymore. You know what I mean?
Right.
You can just keep pushing a song and it's not, you're not driven by what's on the radio or what's on MTV. So you keep getting before new people haven't heard it yet and it's new. They're just discovering it now. But we also live in a world where people want that next thing right away. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, you could push your song out and get new people to discover it indefinitely. But the people that you already have, I think, are going to want you to keep releasing new stuff or they'll get tired.
Right. Absolutely. The ones that are paying attention.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a bit of a double-edged coin, I guess. Double-edged sword, two-sided coin. I don't know how to say that.
Yeah, you kind of mixed them, but yeah.
Mixed metaphors, right? Double-edged
Yeah.
sword. Yeah.
So,
So,
all right.
well, yeah, interesting. It's all, like I said, it's all very fascinating to me because I'm new to this era of music marketing and kind of excited, you know?
What's up?
So, all right. Well, we wanted to get into the propositions, right? The proposals that will be on the ballot in New York. I don't know how excited we are about that. Maybe music is more exciting than this kind of stuff, but people need to know about it because when you go to vote, you're going to be seeing these in New York, right? And you should know what you're getting into because let's be honest, it's a little complicated. It's a little complex. And I was actually looking at this before. To be fair, I have not gone through all six of them yet. I wanted to save it really for this so that we can look at it together for the first time. But my first impression of all of this is wow. First of all, you look at these different sites that are trying to explain these things, and it's not necessarily easy to get the text of what these amendments say. It seems like they just want to summarize it for you, and some want to even tell you what's good about them and maybe what's bad about them. But it's weird to me fundamentally that we as voters are being tasked with going to the polls and voting on these very technical things. And we're not even really being presented with the text. And what does that say? What does that say when a website doesn't want to give you the actual text of what you're voting on? To me, it says they don't think that the people are going to be able to digest this stuff without summaries, without these different things. So does that suggest that maybe we, the people, should not be voting on? Maybe this should be left to the legislature, to vote on something so complicated?
Mm. I think it part of it is also supposed to be on the voter, right? To educate themselves
Sure.
on the issues, which it can be difficult because there's just so many things that come out, so much stuff to look up and be a part of. But that's part of the people's responsibility as well.
Yeah, it is. But what does it tell you when you go on these sites and they won't even give you the text? They just try to summarize all these things. They
Right.
can't present the text and say, here it is. What do you think about it? Why are they doing that on election day? Because that's what happens on election day. You go there, you get the ballot, right? And you just have the text, yes or no, up or down, yes or no. Do you think most people, because I'm a lawyer, I'm an attorney, I'm trained to read the stuff. And I'll be honest, it can be a little complicated. Now, maybe I'm reading more into it than the average person would because I'm thinking about, oh, when it says this, I know based on certain precedent, this could mean this. Maybe I'm putting more onto it than the plain text. But even I'm saying for myself, some of the stuff is a bit complex. So for the average person, is it asking them too much to know what they're voting
Mhm.
on? And as an example, we'll talk about the first one, which is probably the most controversial here. You see so much written on this, right? We had a bit of a discussion on this before, where we looked at the plain text and potential side effects of it. But you're seeing what I would describe as scare tactics by some, and also
Hmm.
people maybe legitimately concerned about what this might end up entailing, right? Because it sounds good, but then as a voter, it's on you to decipher all this, right? You've got to look at the text, you got to look at what people are saying about it, you got to look at these articles that come out and these groups that tell you to vote against it. Then you have to try to think about, well, to what extent are they good faith arguments, and to what extent are they just trying to scare you into voting against your own interest, or into voting against equal rights or whatever, because that's what this is on its face, the equal rights amendment.
Right. And that's like you said, if you're looking at the arguments for and against, you got to also take into account their uh,
The source.
the source, yeah, what their motivation is to say do vote for or vote against it. And judge, you got to look at both sides to see if you can decipher where the real point is versus what someone's trying to push.
Right. Now on this first one, the equal rights amendment, you have the Republican leaning groups all saying to vote no, but they're
Mm,
not saying vote no because they're against equal rights, right? That's not how they're putting it. They're saying vote no to protect seniors, vote no to protect certain things. So they're focused on the side effects. And I'll admit, when I looked at it for the first time, because this one we did look at before, I identified potential side effects. I say I wasn't saying that was a reason to vote against it, but I did see avenues of this being challenged, of lawsuits being filed, and potentially things that we already have in place being undone, right? We wouldn't want that.
mm,
And that was something
right.
we had seen with I think I sent you an article or an editorial that was written about age discrimination, the age aspect of this.
Mm,
So what they're saying
right.
is if you ban age discrimination, you could lose certain benefits that seniors now enjoy, right? Because a lawsuit will probably be filed saying it's a violation of this amendment to provide benefits for seniors because now you're discriminating against people who aren't old, right? And that's against the law.
Right. Yeah, and we talked about that before, like when, like you said, when bringing things like this, which may be good on the surface and sound good, someone's going to look at it from a different angle and maybe see a way either to find a loophole in it or tear it apart or find a way to make it less effective or not effective in the way that it was intended. So you got to
Right.
kind of take that in account when you're writing these things or pushing these things.
Yeah, yeah. And, I'm speaking from someone not just who is an attorney, but who has experience writing legislation. And
Mm,
it's funny when you're in law school, they tell you when courts interpret laws, they look at what the intent was, right? What did the framers intend when they wrote this? You hear that a
right.
lot. And sometimes they'll dig that deep and they'll look at hearings on the floor of legislature, what the debate was, what they said. So if two lawyers are in court saying, this was intended to mean this, no, it was intended to mean this. Sometimes they'll go and they'll actually look at the comments made by the person who wrote it, right? And usually it's a senator or a congressperson or whoever saying this is going to do that, and if they can find some clarity, that could be useful. But I'll tell you, that's not something that happens as often as you would think. And they've never asked me, you know what I mean? I was obviously a legislative staffer drafting this language. No judge has ever called me saying, hey, when you wrote that law, what did you mean by this? You know what I mean? So,
Mm,
and one example of that in practice is the state of origin law now in New York, right? I did write some of an early draft of it, let's say. But
hmm
um, it does things where if you look at how it's being implemented, it seems like it's not meeting the intent, right? We talked about the intent being we wanted to show the public where all the guns were coming from, meaning every single gun. I wanted a database of, oh, there was a shooting last night. I want to be able to go online and as soon as possible, maybe not immediately, but at a certain point, be able to go online and say, oh, this shooting that happened over here was done by a gun that came from South Carolina or whatever. You know what I mean? I wanted to personalize it. It doesn't have to have people's names and that kind of stuff, but at least a
right.
description, maybe a date, a time, and a location, or whatever. But something to so that it's personal enough that you can actually look at a particular incident. Whereas what we see in practice is they don't itemize it like that. There are no particular incidents listed. They give you a one-page PDF and they say top 10
It's a
counties where
summary.
guns are, right?
Yeah, it's just a brief summary.
The
But
summary. And
it's
so
like,
no one, and maybe if there was a lawsuit, they would look into that a little bit deeper. But my general point is they did what they did based on their reading of the law, and no one
right,
actually came to the people who wrote it, as far as I can tell, and said, "Hey, what did you mean by that?"
right. And also, they could do it. I mean, if they can create that one page PDF, that means they have the data. It's
Right.
just it's just listing the data, you
Yeah,
know.
as far as I know, and by the way, I did contact the state police on this. I have yet to hear a response back, and so
Right.
I'm thinking after the election, if I still don't hear from them, I'm going to put pressure on them through my political folks. But as far as I can tell, as of now, I think their reading of the law is that they don't need to provide the data in an itemized way. I think they
Right.
think that they are in compliance with the law, but I would certainly like clarity on that. And I would like to speak with them and say, hey, listen, as someone who is one of the people involved in putting this together, you're not really meeting the intent of the legislation by what you're doing now. So I say all that to say when you have something like this is the Equal Rights Amendment. Yes, it is possible that despite great intentions with all these provisions, some of this could be twisted around and found to mean something different. You have
Right.
to go by the clear reading of a statute. So you really only start looking into intent and things like that when things start getting ambiguous, right? But if the law says what it says and judges can look at that and be like, no, I know what that says, that's clear to me, then that's going to end
Right.
the discussion, right? They're going to say the law says this, we're going to stick with this. So
Right.
here's how the New York City Council website summarizes it. And I have questions about this as well, which we can get into. But it says description. The proposal prohibits discrimination based on ethnicity, national origin, age, disability, and sex, including sexual orientation, gender identity, pregnancy, and abortion rights by enshrining these rights in the state constitution. Okay. Then it says impact. And it's got 3 bullet points here. Protects abortion access, safeguards the right to abortion under the state constitution, ensuring lasting protections based on pregnancy status, regardless of any changes at the federal level, right? Okay. Keeps power in New Yorkers' hands, solidifies protections for civil rights in the Constitution, keeping decision making in the hands of the people of our state, closes loopholes, strengthens anti discrimination laws, closing the gaps that could be exploited to deny civil rights. Now, what do you think about that? Because to me, I'm reading these 3 bullet points and it sounds like an advertisement for the proposal. It sounds like
Right.
it's telling you this is great and you should vote for it.
Right.
I'm not reading this as neutral language. And this is coming from a governmental website, council.nyc.gov. This isn't a campaign or a candidate site or anyone else. This is the New York City Council's own governmental website. Um, I don't know. I don't think that phrasing is appropriate.
Well, I think it leaves a lot to it leaves a lot open. For example, it says closes loopholes. Or what loopholes? What is it closing? What kind of, issues here? Um, it says closing the gaps that could be exploited to deny civil rights. Okay, but what gaps are they
Right.
talking
And
about?
also, it doesn't mention concerns, which I believe are legitimate, that some of these gaps that could be exploited could go in the other way, could cut the other way. That
Right.
it strengthens
Yeah.
anti-discrimination laws. Okay, and on its face, that's great. But again, what if you have benefits for elderly folks, which would now be challenged as discrimination?
Right.
People hear the word discrimination and they automatically have a negative visceral reaction to it. It sounds horrible because they're thinking of discrimination meaning holding someone back based on their status. But
Right.
we have certain classes in our law and in our society that, let's face it, are discriminatory, but they're meant to be positive, if that makes sense. Like, for example, Medicare for elderly people and things like that. That's, if you want to really get technical, that's a form of discrimination, but it's not what we think of as a
Right.
bad form of discrimination.
Right. Yeah, you can look at it and say, well, that's age discrimination. And
Yeah,
someone who wants to either take advantage, go through a loophole, or oppose it could then come back and say, well, you know what? The fact that the law says there's no discrimination, but seniors are the only ones being able to take advantage of that discount.
right.
You're discriminating against me because I'm not a senior.
Exactly. Exactly.
And that may not be what it was intended to do. And of course, there's situations that are different. Seniors could are on generally retired and on different type of budgets and have different income of making ability, and so it's meant to protect them, to help them. But someone else could be like, well, I want a piece of that too. And so, yeah, how do you deal with that type of situation?
Right. Right. That's why, like we said, it's very important that when you create these laws, that you really think about what unintended consequences might flow from them, or how they might be exploited, or maybe you're
Right,
creating a framework that you think is solving a certain problem, and maybe it is addressing that in some way, but in doing so, you're creating other problems somewhere else that you didn't think of, and you really need to
now I
think
think
through.
no, go ahead.
Now, so you really need to think these through. One point I'll make, I think I mentioned this once before when we talked about it, but when it comes to constitutional law analysis of these laws that discriminate on their face, they aren't like most constitutional analyses, right? They aren't black and white, cut and dry. You win or you lose 100% of the time. There is sometimes wiggle room depending on how the law is written and what you're talking about. So let's say, for example, you had this enshrined in the state constitution. Now, this is part of our New York State Constitution that you cannot discriminate on the basis of age and there's other factors. Okay. Then something comes up, right? Some local law is passed or some local policy is passed by a government that seems to conflict with that in some way. Like, for example, we just said someone who's not a senior coming through and saying, hey, wait a minute, our Constitution now says no age discrimination, but I can't get these benefits that seniors are getting. If that
Right,
were to happen, it isn't an automatic you lose the case or you win the case based on this discrimination. It would go through an analysis, a constitutional analysis. And what ends up happening is strict scrutiny. The highest level of scrutiny gets used for this type of discrimination. Normally, that's based that's reserved for age for racial discrimination, right? But if you were to enshrine all these other things into the Constitution and basically put them on the same level as racial discrimination, you will be heightening the scrutiny that these other local laws or policies would have to be subjected to. And so what that would mean is it would be presumptively unconstitutional, presumptively not allowed, but there still is a barrier one could reach to pass it to uphold it. So it would be harder. The bottom line on that is it would be harder for such discrimination to stand, but it wouldn't be impossible. It would have to be narrowly tailored to meet a compelling governmental interest. It would have to be shown to be the least restrictive means of meeting a very compelling governmental goal. So maybe the government in that case would be able to show, in spite of this constitutional amendment, what we did here, these benefits we provided seniors were are meeting a compelling interest of helping our senior population, and there was no other less restrictive way to do it, less discriminatory way on the young population to do it than to do it like this. That's something that they may be able to get over, but it does make their case harder than it is now, right? Because now, without something like this, any action they took would be presumptively lawful, presumptively constitutional. With this in place, it would be presumptively unconstitutional, and the government would have the burden of showing why it really needed to stay.
right.
So you going
Yeah,
into the case basically an underdog. You want to put it like that, right? Like you'd be the presumed loser unless you could have a really awesome case to show why you should win, which is a reversal of how it would be now.
right. And we saw this happen. We're seeing this happen actually now with the overturning of affirmative action.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy who was the architect behind that, Edward Blum, um, he's been working for years to try to overturn these civil rights types of protections and whatnot, and finally got affirmative action overturned. And so now he's turning his sights on other things. And what he did recently was there was a fund in Atlanta, an Atlanta-based venture capital group had a fund for businesses that had an owner that was at least one owner that was a woman of color.
Mhm.
because they're, usually disadvantaged or disenfranchised and whatnot. So they had this fund to help business owners in that regard. And so after that overturning, Blum turned his sights at that fund and said, you can't do that now. It's discriminatory because that affirmative action says you can't use race conscious
Right.
things and whatnot. And after a year of battling in court, that venture capital group had to drop that fund that was being used to help, women of color who are typically at a disadvantage in starting businesses, and they had to drop that fund from this lawsuit.
Right. So they'll use precedent also, right? If they get
Right,
one victory in their favor, then they'll try to use that to build momentum for the
right.
next.
And he's been doing that with a lot of places. He's been taking colleges to task who are trying to still maintain some of those DEI points. And now, like you said, precedent, and he's able to knock down some of these protections that were in place because now he's saying, well, now I'm discriminated against and
Right.
can't do that. And so it's similar in this way. Someone who's looking to take advantage of either the language or the outcome of whatever the law or the
Yeah.
measure is
So
in
do you
place.
think maybe they were overly ambitious in what they included in here? Because obviously a big part of this is abortion rights, right? And concerns about Roe v. Wade being overturned. And you see states now going to great lengths to try to codify the protections of Roe in their state. So
Right.
New York is no different. And this does talk about, abortion outcomes and so forth being part of this. But were they overly ambitious in trying to expand this to, for example, age discrimination and these other factors? Would that potentially turn people against this amendment who otherwise would have supported it?
I think they probably bundle stuff like this together to try to catch those people who might be against some things that are in there. Like some people may not be for the abortion. But if they're talking about add age discrimination in there, that might be something that they're for, especially someone older who came from a different era
Right.
and abortion was not something that was, talked about or gender thing or whatnot. You
True,
know,
true. But don't forget though, this is an and, not an or, right? So it isn't
right.
like you can pick or choose which rights you're gonna be upholding here. This
Yeah,
would
but if it's voted against, then none of them go through.
Right, but people tend to be more, I think, more motivated in the short term by fear. So,
Right.
if a group comes out and says, "Well, hold up, you can't vote for this because this would do this," oh, I can't vote for this. Even if they like something else that's in there, they might be like, "Yeah, but I can't be having that." For example, what if there's fear? What if people are really concerned they can lose their elderly benefits? Well,
Right.
they might love everything else that's in there. Maybe they want to protect abortion rights, but they don't want to lose their their ability to be retired and have health care as a senior or whatever.
Right.
So it's, I don't know, like you said, that people may be writing it this way to try to create a broader coalition, but maybe a side effect of that is that they're also turning people away or creating more ammunition for something like this to be attacked. Because let's be honest, if it was only about the abortion issue, I'm sure the people on the right would have reasons to oppose it as well. And they would maybe not be able to talk about age discrimination anymore, but maybe they would talk about something else.
Right.
Try to find some other clever way to say why you should vote against it. So we don't know. I mean, a lot of people's motivation for opposing it could be abortion, but they don't want to say that because they know that would be an unpopular position. So they're trying to find other ways to attack it.
Right. And this at least this site here seems to be what's going to appear on the ballot, right? And the ballot
Well,
isn't
hold on a
this what
second. You're on the New York City Council one?
yeah.
Yeah, but does it have the actual text? I didn't see the text on there. I see the description.
It, isn't that what the description is gonna, isn't the description like that gonna appear on the ballot?
No, no, their summary. That's their summary of it.
I mean, I figured it was what's going to appear on the ballot because, there's only so much room they could have. There's right,
No.
it's got to do
So
the short description of it.
no, let's see if we can get the actual wording of it. This is their summary of it. That's why I'm saying I don't
They
know
could
how to
probably
book it.
have if it's just their summary of it, I would think they should include at least a link to a fully fleshed out description of everything, or on this impact part have some pros and cons, right? What are the pros of this? What are the cons, or what are the supporters say? What do the opposers say? And have a few bullet points if there's, I mean, it's a
Right,
web page. They've got plenty of room.
right. Well, on the nycvotes.org site, they do have summary of statements in support and summary of statements in opposition. So
Okay.
they're at least trying to give you more here. Like it looks like in support, you have 1199, you have BK Forge, Make the Road Action, New York State General Letitia James, New York Civil Liberties Union, New York Immigration Coalition, New Yorkers for Equal Rights, Planned Parenthood, SEIU 32BJ, and the League of Women Voters, all supporting it.
Right.
So even on this one, though, it says if this proposal passes, New Yorkers would be protected under the law from discrimination based on these criteria. I mean, I guess that's technically true, right? It's like that conversation we had about the father who complained about the English lesson, right? Like you have to decipher what's factually true versus what's being editorialized.
Right. Well, what would you like to see on this page, or
Number one,
even
I would like to see the full text of what's going to appear on the ballot. I think that's important. What I would not want to see is editorializing on a government website. I don't think it's appropriate for it to say things like keeps power in New Yorkers' hands. That just makes it sound like it's a great thing and you should vote for it.
right? And it doesn't keeps power. What power? What do you mean by keeps power? And
Well,
but
it does tell you a little bit because it says it's keeping decision making in the hands of the people of our state, solidifying protections for civil rights in the state constitution. Oh, you got to go up to the part before that where it says regardless of any changes at the federal level. So again, this
right.
is really a reaction to Roe v. Wade being overturned,
Sure, sure, sure.
and right, and concerns that if Republican Congress gets in, they could make it illegal at the federal level altogether.
Right.
So look, it's not like I disagree with what they're saying here. It's just I think that the government website has an obligation to be neutral about these things.
Right.
And
Um,
this by the way, this is something that could be challenged. I could see a lawsuit based on the wording of this. Now we're so close to the election, I don't know if it'll make a difference at this point, but I could definitely see that. That
right, right,
as a city council, this is New York City Council. We know that they're known for being very partisan, but on their own website, they really shouldn't have language in there that suggests you should vote one way or another on this.
right.
We had a poll that we were going to ask about this issue, right? So I wanted to put that out there, in particular about the age discrimination aspect of it. Because again, just because that's in there, it doesn't mean that seniors will automatically lose their benefits. It could very well be upheld in spite of that. But it also most likely is going to welcome lawsuits, and it could lead to this stuff being overturned. I mean, imagine this goes up to the U.S. Supreme Court with their leanings now. You never know how they're going to come out on these issues.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
I would be afraid. Well, let's put it to the people. Let's leave it to the people. See what they say on this. So the poll question of the week is: if New York's Equal Rights Amendment banning age discrimination is passed, are you concerned about potential side effects to senior benefits? And I guess we can put in a little bit more description in there to provide context on the poll. For some reason, my laptop is not charged. Apparently, let me make sure it's retaining its charge. Hold on one second.
Don't want you cutting out in the middle of in the middle of the podcast. Um, but yeah, we can put that poll up and see where people lie on it. Um, and see what kind of feedback we get from these things here. It's um seniors losing their protections or losing their benefits is something that's a massive concern. And so I think it should be very clear. Um, clearly stated, what it entails, what's the possible outcomes and whatnot.
Well, yeah. I mean, and you have to be careful that you're not editorializing also by
Right.
doing that, right? Because this
Sure.
is not something that's known. It's not like the site can tell you, oh, well, if this is passed, bye Medicare. It's not. It's
Right.
just a possibility that certain things could be undone. So you don't know for sure, but there are concerns out there. Maybe the
Right.
New York State site, was it NYC Votes, whatever that site is, maybe that one does it better in terms of providing statements for and against and letting people read what people are saying.
Right. Right. All right. All right.
All right, well, let's move on to the other ones because the other ones are not as discussed. Now, these are described as Mayor Adams' proposals, which is interesting, right? Are people going to have some kind of reaction based on who's behind it? We say consider the source all the time.
Right.
These are
Considering his
proposals,
indictment.
yeah, proposals 2 through 6. So we'll go through them quickly here. Proposal 2, it says this proposal skips the typical lawmaking process that allows New Yorkers to help shape proposed laws through input and aims to give more power for increased enforcement and regulations to the city's sanitation department. So you look at the impact, increases small business enforcement, gives the department more power to enforce rules against small businesses, expands authority for more rules, provides the department with more power over regulations on the placement of trash bags, undermines public input on cleanliness, bypasses and reduces the public's ability to influence specific changes. I see what's going on here. I think I've cracked the code on this one.
Well, this one seems to be a little bit more balanced.
Balanced or is it negative? I think what's
But
happening
no,
is
yeah, but in the first part it says it gives, I mean, I guess it could be seen as negative. In the first part, it's talking about it gives the department more power, provides the department more power over regulations. And then it says, I guess, yeah, it's not balanced. It's saying you're losing any type of control here.
yeah, I
Yeah,
think
this is
this is
yeah.
Adrian Adams. Shout out to our girl, Speaker of the City Council, Adrian Adams, uh, not liking the mayor's proposals and using the City Council website to tell the city why they should vote against them. Right? She was all for the first one, but I think that's
You
what
think
this is. And
so?
by the way, I don't like the way this one looks either. But
Yeah,
I'm being fair here, right? You saw the
right,
first
right,
one that said it was all pro. This one was all negative. I don't think the city website should be doing this. The city council
right.
shouldn't be telling the voters how to vote. They're clearly trying to influence the vote here.
But even look at the description, like it skips the typical lawmaking process that allows New Yorkers to help shape the laws. Um, yeah, it does seem there's kind of it's less neutral in the wording of it. Let's see what the rest of these are about here. You want to go on to the third one?
Yeah.
I think
So Proposal 3, the proposal requires redundant review processes of proposed laws, adding significant taxpayer costs and delays to lawmaking. It also reduced. See, now here's the thing.
this
If you, you know now, right, that this is not what the ballot is going to say, right? When you go to vote, it's not going to ask you, do you want to require redundant review processes of laws and add significant taxpayer costs and delays to lawmaking? It's not going to say that on the ballot.
But look at even the look at the headline, the proposal 3. Wasteful spending, slower results, and less budget
Budget
transparency.
transparency.
It's very biased.
Increases bureaucracy and taxpayer costs, slows ability to solve problems, weakens budget transparency. So they're definitely trying to tell you how to vote on these.
Yeah. This was definitely written. Yeah. Yeah. Um,
Number 4,
looking at some of the other titles, wait till we get to a couple of these other titles here. It's interesting.
blocking public safety laws. This proposal would block the ability to pass laws that improve public safety in response to New Yorkers' priorities by adding excessive bureaucracy and mayoral interference in scheduling.
I think the most blatant one is probably Proposal 5.
Meaningless and misleading capital planning changes. Do you want
Meaningless.
imagine that heading was on the ballot when you go vote? Prop 5, yes or no? Meaningless and misleading capital planning changes. You with that, Jay?
Look at the description of that.
This proposal falsely claims to improve the city's capital planning process, but it offers no meaningful improvements and fails to advance transparency. It disregards independent recommendations to change the city's comprehensive infrastructure report and instead proposes changes to a different process that covers less than 1% of the city's infrastructure. Impact: fails to advance reform, distracts from real problems, leaves NYC without clear infrastructure review. So, how do you think Adrian Adams is going to vote on this one?
Well, how would you think anyone's going to vote on him? Oh, we don't want any of that. It's been false claims. We don't want any of that.
Proposal
Yeah,
7.
this is very, very much leading.
This is propaganda. Let's call it what it is. This is
Yeah,
propaganda. Proposal
yeah,
6: changes to unrelated city operations. This proposal claims to change the authority and structures of several unrelated city offices and formalizes an existing role. You know what? I want to go really quick now over to nycvotes.org and see the difference. Because on the first one, it looked like they were actually using kind of similar language. Is this the same?
uh-huh.
Cleaning
Let's see.
property on number 2. So on the second one, on the sanitation department, it says, this is nycvotes.org now. DSNY would have increased authority to keep all city property clean, including parks and highway medians, and to hold street vendors accountable for following rules at those locations. It would also allow DSNY to regulate how New Yorkers put out their garbage for collection. So this is not the same description as you saw on the city council website.
No, and there's a link to
Yeah,
a longer description.
right. Now this one may be controversial because, as we talked about here, Mayor Adams is rolling out these new rules for landlords in New York City, right, when it comes to
Right,
their garbage bins. And so
right,
it looks
right,
like he's trying to give the sanitation department more power to influence some of these regulations, and even as against small businesses here.
right. Let's look at this other one. The one, what was that, number 5? The meaningless and
Yeah,
misleading.
meaningless and misleading.
What is an NYC vote
They call it
says?
capital planning.
Right. The city must assess the cost of maintaining city facilities, infrastructure investments, and publish these assessments in capital planning reports. Um,
So they're
yeah,
writing it in a much more neutral way.
it seems a little bit more neutral.
But you notice the plain text is being hidden from plain sight.
What do you mean the plain text?
Meaning, when you go to vote, what will be on your ballot? The actual, because when you vote, it can't be
Right,
a summary of the proposal. If the constitutional amendment is to be adopted by the voters of New York, that language, the whole language, has to be in your face on the ballot when you vote. I'm not
right.
seeing, I see descriptions. I'm not
What's it going
seeing
to say on the
full language.
ballot?
It's going to have the text of the Constitution, the amendment. It's not going to say, this would give the DSNY more power for, no, it would say exactly what they're
Right.
able to do. It would tell you what it's doing.
I think it should be included on here so it would better prepare people when they go to the ballot box and they see it on the page, you know,
Right.
which one they're looking at.
Yeah. So we're going to have to do more research on this ourselves, I think, and look at the plain text of all these. Maybe next week we can come back and present
Right.
to the people, and we can make more informed decisions, because these are not, as we see, neutral descriptions of what's going on here, especially on the city council site, right? It seems like they are just trying to tell you vote yes on one and no for the others.
Right. Yeah. So,
So we will follow up on that one. Meanwhile, we had a poll last week about, or actually it's a few weeks ago, but we carried it over, about Mayor Adams resigning since being indicted, right?
right. So the poll that we had asked, now that Mayor Adams has been indicted, do you believe it's time for him to resign? And we had a number of responses here. And given, you know, we're talking about whether or not he should be able, if he's able to execute his duties well, if he's able to serve the people in New York while he's fighting these type of charges, even though he's still innocent until proven guilty. 90% said yes, given 10% said no. That yes, he should resign.
Okay. And do we have
We
any
got to,
nuanced comments here, or is this people bashing Mayor Adams because they never liked him in the first place?
um, well, they said. One said yes, the details in the indictment are extremely damning, and even before the indictment was made public, Mayor Adams had completely and irretrievably lost public support. The city's not helped in the slightest with him staying in power. He needs to resign as soon as possible. Um, let's see. Someone else said he should. NYC is a strong mayor system of government, and that wasn't changed when the new charter got pushed through. The mayor's office pretty much runs everything in NYC, including much of the budget, making up the budget. He's not, he's just kind of giving some editorializing here. Um, what's up to do with the governor? Yeah, he doesn't go any deeper in there. He's just talking about Adams, saying Adams is tone deaf enough to expect to just brush off the noise.
Well, see, this
One
does,
says at
yeah, go
very
ahead.
least, I was gonna say one says at the very least he should step aside from his daily duties, preferably without pay. If he were to do so, who would become acting mayor? If he doesn't, he's up for election in November 2025, and it's gonna be brutal. So someone says he should step aside from daily duties. Could he do that without stepping out of his seat?
They're saying that he should not resign, he should stay in office, but not be the acting mayor anymore.
It sounds like that. It just says he should at the very least, he should step aside from his daily duties.
I guess
Um,
delegate more power to city commissioners and
maybe.
other folks.
Yeah, maybe.
I was going to say it's interesting that you have such a big disparity because what ends up happening is if a politician, elected official, is unpopular, let's say with a certain demographic
Right,
already, there you can probably safely assume most of them are going to say, yeah, he should resign no matter what
right.
circumstances, right? So automatically that is a certain percentage that's going to be against him. And then you might have people
Sure.
who may be more on the fence now who could be persuaded by this. And, oh, well, he was indicted. He doesn't have the time and the ability to focus on New York City anymore. And so you can kind of envision how this might break down amongst different demographics of people just based
Right.
on where they were initially, and then based on how this could have an impact on the margins. But it seems like even impacting people on the margins can make a big difference in overall numbers when it might have been somewhat lopsided to begin with in terms of his popularity.
Right. And it looks like this comment here seems a little bit less like they just don't like Adams. He says, yes, just like I think Trump was wrong to run for office with indictments against him, that's the real election interference. I think Adams should step down. Adams is compromised. If he is proven not guilty, he can win back the public trust, then run for office again. Until then, he has legal issues to deal with. Let the
Oh,
deputy mayor step up and run the city.
yeah. I mean, I would push back a little bit against that because he doesn't have to prove himself innocent. He
Right,
is innocent until proven guilty. And
right,
so, do we want to force someone to step aside simply by having been indicted when we know that means that they're being accused of a crime, but they haven't been,
right,
nothing has been proven against them yet?
right.
So, that might be a slippery slope to go down.
Would be
So,
weaponized.
yes, we've talked about that. There's a danger there. But I understand at the same time, there are legitimate concerns about someone's ability to truly focus on the job of running the city with all of this happening, right? Having to defend yourself against these lawsuits. Now we're talking about lawyers for the city stepping down because they don't want to be involved in this. They don't want to have to defend the
Right,
mayor against this and just get that muck on them. You're talking
right,
about not being able to hire commissioners because they don't want to be politically associated with him,
right,
deputy mayors, all kinds of folks.
right,
When it comes to doing deals, right? You're trying to advocate on behalf of the city to the state legislature, let's say. You're going to go up there and you're going to say, hey, I want mayoral control extended, or I want this funding, I want this. There are political considerations now. What if
yeah, absolutely,
upstate lawmaker is like, well, if I give you that, my constituents are going to be like, hey, isn't he corrupt? Isn't he the guy who was committing these crimes in New York City? How are you
right,
giving him money? How are you helping him? So
right,
it complicates things in a way that
yeah,
does have a detrimental effect on the city. There's really no getting away from that.
right, and on the ability to do the job, he may be able, even if he has, like you just outlined, even if he has the time,
Right.
to do the duties, the people that he needs to work with, to negotiate with, to form coalitions with, may not want to touch him because, he's sullied right now.
Yeah.
And that really halts progress or possibilities for the city.
Right, right. And then you're looking at, I guess this maybe has more to do with if you were to be convicted, if some of the stuff is proven true. But when you
Right,
start dealing with foreign powers being involved, you always have the ability of extortion, blackmail, right? Things like that.
right,
They have something that they can hold over him. Um,
right.
could that have a negative impact on the city? But you know, he does have his opportunity to fight the case, to defend the case. And again, he doesn't have to prove anything. He doesn't have to prove his
They
innocence.
have to prove it, right?
Right. The prosecutors have to prove his guilt. And so, you know, really his job is to show that they haven't met their burden of proving anything. So,
Right.
and
And to that point, one of the comments here says U.S. attorneys don't seem to make a practice of taking a flyer and just bringing charges against anyone unless they've got about a 99% chance of winning the case convincingly. Just look at the results various U.S. attorneys have achieved against other political defendants around the nation over the last 10 to 15 years. The investigations might take forever and stink badly, but if they bring stated charges, they've probably got the receipts on the defendant.
and that may be true, but that's also not a reason to say indictment equals conviction. We still have to have the
Right,
process. You know what I mean?
right,
They also
absolutely.
say you can indict a ham sandwich. Have you heard that phrase before? A ham sandwich can be indicted. So,
Right.
you know, while it is true that they tend not to bring cases that they're
The
not
ham
confident,
sandwich
especially
was
not at
guilty.
that level, right? They don't want the embarrassment of prosecuting a mayor, the mayor of New York City, and not having a case. You know, so
Right.
yeah, obviously they're confident in what they have, but
Sure, sure.
you still need to let the process play out and give
Right.
people due process. The mayor has due process. I think that's important to note here. Uh,
Absolutely.
Certainly, when it comes to his rights as a criminal defendant, right? We can argue that the due process he's afforded in a criminal court of law is not the same due process he should get in the political sphere, right? Because, like we mentioned,
Right.
just being under indictment does have detrimental political effects that
Right.
does impact the way the job can be done. So that's
Right.
that's why it's tricky, right? Because we don't want to create a situation where anyone who's indicted automatically has to go away, step down, lose their job, resign. We don't want that, but we
Right.
understand the consequences, the implications of an indictment, especially like we're saying, something so heavy like this, right? It's a U.S. Attorney, a U.S. prosecutor indicting the sitting mayor of New York City. First time that's ever happened in the modern history of New York City. So
Right.
obviously a ton of gravity on that, right?
Right.
You know, is the city going to suffer in the meanwhile?
Right. And I mean to the person's point here, usually someone usually like you said, your point and this person's point, um, when the feds, it's the stereotype, right? Or it's the common joke that when the feds go after someone, they're gonna get them because they do so much of that pre-research and getting their stuff in a row to make sure they can get a higher conviction rate.
Right.
So,
Meanwhile, the mayor's lawyer is saying there are no text messages and there are no emails that would prove any of the stuff. So who knows what's out there?
right, absolutely, absolutely. It kind of reminds me a little bit this the guy quoting this 99% chance of winning. The Japanese system has a 99% conviction rate.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's basically because of the same thing. They don't bring the charges unless they know they can win.
Well, it's like that in the U.S. too. I mean, what do you think the conviction rate is here? It's definitely in the 90s, right?
Is it that high?
Let's look it up. See if we can Google that.
For federal, right? It's
Well, let's see
it's
what's
that high.
happening.
That's where this that's I think that's where the stereotype kind of comes from, right?
Let's see. Um, okay. Oh, that's interesting. How are conviction rates so high in America and Japan? Someone actually
Right.
asked. So it seems that they're comparable.
US is more than 90% a
Yeah, so
conviction
this
rate.
commenter here says, I mean, I don't know how accurate this is. I'm just seeing this online, but someone says 90% in the Fed system,
Right.
60 to 80% in the states.
I would not be surprised if that's true. Um, you know, you don't it's you say you can't beat the feds, but
Oh, well, here you
so
go, though. Here's, yeah, see, this is what I was thinking also. Someone says the US has a similar 99.7% conviction rate when you include guilty pleas, which is a fair comparison to the Japanese conviction rates, as guilty pleas are pretty much non existent in Japan. State courts have slightly lower, but not too different, with 99.5% conviction rates.
yeah.
Practically, Japanese equivalent of guilty plea in the US is abbreviation trials, which counted as verdict. So that's
Mm,
kind of was my thought as well, because overwhelmingly most people here are going to plead guilty, when charges are brought against them, unless they really were falsely accused or think that they can beat the case somehow. But most, and don't forget, it depends on what kind of case you're talking here. Most cases are probably going to be DUIs and things like that. Things, we're not talking about the mayor of New York City being brought down. That's not a common case in the U.S.
Right.
They're usually more mundane than that. So,
Right.
in,
Yeah.
in any event, it is an extremely high rate.
Well, we'll see how that plays out with the mayor and with the ham sandwich. Both are
Yeah,
maintaining their innocence.
right,
Uh, So
right.
I
So
think I
yeah,
think the ham sandwich did it though. I mean that's my
well,
opinion.
who definitely did it?
Yeah,
The rubber chicken.
definitely
The rubber
corrupt
chicken.
individual.
Who gets
Corrupt.
the rubber chicken of the week? We
I
talked
would
about people.
say let me choose this one here. I think the rubber chicken of the week would go to the New York City Council for the way that they
Ah,
wrote that website with a clear bias and a way to steer people how they think they should vote, how they
you know,
want them to vote.
well said. I agree. They get the rubber chicken of the week with love, but come on, we got to do better here. And
Yeah.
I'm going to make a post, by the way, about this. I know I'm playing with fire by doing this because you're getting all kinds
Uh-oh.
of people coming in talking about, this is why you got to vote Republican. I think it's like, whatever. People always use any opportunity they can to insert their own political agenda. But
Sure, sure.
I do think it's worthy of calling out that the New York City Council is doing this on the .gov website, right? They should not be editorializing this way. Let's do
Right.
better. Let's strive to do better. That's definitely
Yeah, absolutely I agree.
so.
I agree.
Get the dog barking downstairs. We got a lot going on here. What's the bottom line, Jay? You got one for us this week?
I think you just kind of gave a bottom line there. Like, let's do better. Let's not have this, especially from our government institutions, have this bias when we are supposed to be representing all people, and that means presenting arguments on both sides so that the voters can make up their own minds. And don't be intellectually dishonest when you do it, or disingenuous when you deliver it. Give that information out there. And if you've got a case one way or case for the other, the people can make up their own minds on it. They just need the proper information for that. So let's do better in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. And of course, people can find us everywhere podcasts are available. We're also on Instagram at Nuance Show. Um, that is the tag, right? Nuance Show.
Nuance show.
Yeah, that's the Reddit handle as well. So come chat with us. We have the polls on Daily Coast, right?
Yeah.
So be engaged in the conversation. YouTube as well, of course, for the archives. Um, Talk to us. Let us know your thoughts, your questions, your concerns, complaints. As always, we've got work to do. Thank you for tuning in. We'll catch you next time.